My name's Emily, I'm an artist and jewellery maker. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video includes me just playing with some art supplies and creating a piece that soothes my soul. I wanted to not only limit the amount of art supplies that I used, but also try and have different mediums and colours to see how they all work together, and that is what inspired this piece. And I wanted it to be something that kind of signified the moment at the minute. I am a week into my learning how to self-catheterise, and it is a struggle, shall we say. So I wanted to have something that kind of signified that moment, but trying to turn it into a positive. So this is kind of like turning it into like a sanctuary, what I want the bathroom to eventually be, a place to ease discomfort and somewhere to not be feared. So that's kind of what the meaning behind this piece is. I also do want to turn a series of my paintings, my actual traditional paintings, into prints for my shop as well. So this is definitely going to be one of them. I wanted this piece to exude sort of peace and tranquility, and I think that might be quite significant for certain people, so it will be available eventually when I do a few more pieces as like a series. So I initially drew the piece, the idea that I had in my head, with the Derwent drawing pencil in Solway Blue. It's like a pale sort of cool grey, and I wanted to kind of have something fairly pale so I could at least kind of work within that and develop it as and when I go, kind of not having anything too sort of concrete and just still keeping it very loose. I then went in with my favourite watercolour ever, which is the Schmincke Horodam super granulating watercolour in Glacier Green. And yes, that is just one watercolour, but it's like a muted cobalt turquoise with potter's pink kind of granulation. It's absolutely gorgeous. I did this so then that could dry and kind of do its thing while I went into the other parts of the painting, which was the Winsor & Newton Galleria in Hooker's Green. And anything that I do mention in this video will be linked below. They are affiliate links, so it's a great way of supporting my little channel without having to cost you any extra, and I earn a small commission from that. So it does help me kind of put stuff back into this channel. So anyway, I used that Hooker's Green as a way to kind of map out where I wanted the botanical pieces in this painting to be. I wanted there to be like water lilies in the bathtub, and then I wanted like a peace lily sort of spider plant in the centre as kind of like a focal point, and then in the corners I wanted there to be a fern, I wanted there to be like a string of pearls, and then some form of like hanging plant, whether it's like ivy or something inside, and I wanted that to all kind of have different textures, all using just literally the green paint initially. And that way I wanted to show that you can get like literal variations within just one paint, the way you kind of layer the pieces. The Hooker's Green is quite it's got a really nice viscosity, so you can shear it out and it becomes lighter, almost like a softer olive. But then as you layer it, it becomes really almost like a perylene green, really deep. So it's a very versatile paint. I then mapped out where I wanted the window and thought I'd do that in the same Glacier Green, just to give a bit of continuity within the painting. I also wanted it to be the exact same shape as a mirror, so it kind of has that repeating of like the rounded ellipse shape. Same with the bathtub and the sink. I wanted it to all be very kind of rhythmic within that, like a wave, making you see the sort of feelings, nothing too harsh and like jagged. But I also felt that anything that was going to come afterwards that were more squared off, like the rug and the wallpaper, could then work quite well with still keeping it very serene with the rounded shapes, and then having those as kind of like nods towards like a structure. If you know me and my jewellery, you know I'm partial to gingham, checkerboard, all that sort of pattern. So I wanted that to be present within this because it does make me happy, and that kind of is the point of this painting. It was like a bit of a passion piece just while I was feeling a little bit miserable and my bladder was feeling a little bit sorry for itself. So I wanted this to kind of signify where I'm at, but then hopefully also give people a bit of sort of relief and calm as well as they see it. And it has meaning that's quite deep for me, but then people who might just like the botanical sanctuary-esque vibes will be enough for them as well. But this colour that I'm using here is from Turner. It's the Acryl Gouache in Pastel Olive. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of those shades that I was like really unsure like how much it was going to play a part in my work. It's just it's a lovely tone. It's like got an element of like murkiness and muddiness, but then it has that luminosity because it's that pastel shade. It's just a perfect sort of hybrid. It's really calm. It's like almost like a yellow version of like a sage green. It's beautiful. With it being an acrylic gouache, it is a matte finish when it dries. It does have an element of the lighter shades will dry a little bit darker, the darker shades dry a little bit lighter. But because they're an acrylic, there's a polymer in there, they dry and aren't rewettable. They can't then be reactivated and used again like a watercolour or a traditional gouache. They are more like an acrylic paint. Once they're dry, that's it, you can't use them. So I do use it a little bit more sparingly when I can, so I'm not wasting any. Especially because this colour's gorgeous and I feel like it's going to be in my artwork for a long time, and I don't want to use too much of it too soon and waste any product. And like I said, I wanted there to be cohesion in the rounded sort of gentler shapes, but then with the sort of more structured shapes like the squares and the stripes, I thought I'd still keep them with the same sort of colours, so there's like continuity within the continuity, if that makes sense. So while the more opaque colours like the gouache is more structured, straight lines, like edges, that sort of thing, I then wanted anything to be rounded to be a little bit more sort of looser and airy, because that's the point. I wanted the plants and that sort of thing to be the symbol of peace and serenity within the harsher parts of the painting, and that being life as well. So there are definitely deeper meanings behind this painting, but then you can see it from face value to just be a peaceful piece of like nice colours and botanical sort of esque themes. So it can really appeal to many different people depending on what they want to almost get from this painting. It's very surface level for some, but then for me it definitely kind of signifies the time in my life where I am really struggling. But turning that into a positive, because I do tend to produce the best artwork that I make when I am in a particular part of a certain type of mindset, shall we say. I did want to play with how certain colours interact with each other, so I did kind of layer more acrylic based things on top of more transparent things. Any water that I then added, if they kind of blended into each other and created that flow and movement, I just kind of went with it, because I think that also hopefully signifies what I'm trying to do as well with the meanings behind this, how everything kind of moves within each other, you can't control everything, that sort of aspect. I then went in with the next art supply, and this was the Holbein Acryl Gouache in sepia. I didn't want to use any black or white in this. I'm trying to kind of really push myself in terms of art supplies and colour palettes and things I'm more frequently using to try and see what I can use instead. So instead of black or anything that's too harsh in that respect, I went with sepia because it's a little bit more earthy. It goes with the botanical themes. It keeps things a little bit more sort of neutral, and I think it worked really well with the other colours because it stood out, because there's not many other browns that I use, but then it still has that sort of definition that I wanted in the certain aspects of the painting, and it did contrast really well with the other colours because it's probably the deepest shade that I use. And if I layer the hooker's green, I can get to that depth, but then again it's a completely different hue altogether. I did start with a checkerboard in the rug to kind of map out where I wanted to go, get a feel for the art supply. While certain like straight lines I wanted to kind of have that definition, I didn't want to be too precise with it. I still wanted to have that sort of element of organic feel for it. Same with the wallpaper-esque. I didn't use a ruler or anything to be too massively precise. I just wanted it to be as precise as I could get while still keeping it fairly organic, if that makes sense. I then mixed a small amount of the sepia and the pale olive to get a slightly lighter tone so I could work the plant pot. I was going to do something more like a terracotta, but I still wanted to keep the colour palette fairly cohesive. I didn't want anything too warm because the next colour that I'm going to work into is a pink, and that's kind of like the pop. I want everything to be fairly neutral and calm, and then the pop of pink is the sort of eye-catching part of the focal point of the painting where there's a bit more contrast. Pink and green exudes like a calm sort of ethereal feel to me, and I wanted that sort of element within like the sanctuary part of the painting. So I went in with the next art supply, which was a Posca marker in the shade Raspberry, and started to build up a shape of a laundry basket, so it gives it a little bit of an element of waste, discard, as though kind of put the feelings in a basket, put the lid on kind of thing. And then went in with the next art supply, which was a acrylic paint, the Amsterdam All Acrylics in Persian Rose, which is a really pale pink, but it has a slightly cooler undertone, so I think it paired really nicely with the tone of the Raspberry Posca marker. So I dotted out some kind of floral nods to parts of the botanical pieces and the foliage, because again I wanted there to be like an element of growth, as though in the darker situations and the bits that you're trying to find sanctuary, you can learn from that, and there could be blooming thoughts blossoming into sort of life lessons and whatnot. And that's kind of how I wanted to pop the pops of colour within the pops of kind of meaning as well. Going back to the laundry basket, I wanted it to be a bit more sort of looser. I didn't want anything to be too defined in that respect. I wanted there to be folds, as though, you know, overlapping of thoughts, overlapping of fears, for example, and getting all the colours nicely blended, and that still again being quite different to all the other colours means it does stand out more within the other colour palettes. I then went in with some more dry media. This was the initial pencil that we used to sketch out, and then built the next part of the wallpaper and used the Posca marker in Ivory. This was the 3M, and the other art supply medium. Again, I didn't want to use anything too dark or too light like black and white. I wanted to keep things fairly warm and neutral, hence sepia and ivory were kind of like the extreme either end of the values within the painting. I think the thing that I like the most about the process of this painting is it definitely was cathartic, like a release of kind of getting my feelings out. So looking into that, I can see every part has a meaning, like, again, the laundry folded as though thoughts overlapping. But then for someone who's just looking at the art for as it's seen visually, it can be a nice, sanctuary, calming piece. But the layers within that from my painting of it shows that there's like a need for calm because there is so much dysfunction elsewhere. And then each part of that painting has aspects that kind of exhibit why things are so difficult and what I'm searching for as in sanctuary. I think that's the best part of art, for that people sometimes see it from face value and that's enough for what they want from the piece. But then the creator, myself, has found like the therapeutic part of actually making this painting in itself, that maybe this gave them the journey of finding that inner peace. Art is definitely one of the main sources of my pain relief, so whether it's mental or physical pain that I'm feeling. So for me, this was more than just kind of painting for fun and a distraction. It was actually like trying to get my feelings out on a paper, because I find it harder to verbalise my feelings. The element of obscurity and perception of painting my feelings gives me that sort of comfort blanket of not everyone will completely understand the deeper roots of that, and that kind of makes me feel a little bit more like safer, because the people that will understand will hopefully understand where I'm coming from, and those that won't hopefully won't grasp the darker parts of this painting. The other art supply that I introduced when talking about that was the Caran Dache Luminance pencil in Carmine Lake, and that was just to outline the bathtub. I wanted there to be a bit of a grain as like a contrast from the opaque layers of the gouache, so the grain to kind of capture with the cold pressed paper I think worked quite well as, again, another layer of texture, and the Carmine Lake was the perfect undertone to go with the raspberry Posca marker and the Persian rose acrylic paint. I then took the ivory Posca marker to add a bit of reflection to the lotus-esque flowers in the bathtub and like the light reflection on the water and some dots of sparkles, because that generally just makes me very happy. I then went in with the next and I believe final art supply for this painting. I wanted to keep it very limited in what I used. I wanted there to be enough art supplies to create what I wanted to have in the painting, but then an element of limitation gave a bit of a challenge as well to see what I can do with what I've got. So I used the next art supply, which was another Caran Dache Luminance. This is in Blue Denimes or Nimes, and started to build in a sink-like portion of the painting. The blue again was a really nice contrast, and it was another way of having another element of colour. It goes with the Solway blue and the glacier green, so I think it's a way of adding a bit of cohesion, but then there's another element of interest. The drier medium does have that grain, which I really like to peek through in parts of the painting from the cold pressed paper. I then used the Carmine Lake to sketch out an element of a mirror. I still wanted it to be relatively simplistic. The arch is a theme that keeps going through the painting, so I kept with that, but then I also wanted there to be not introducing any more shapes. There's some looser shapes, organic shapes from the foliage, but then I wanted there to be contrasting with the checkerboard and the stripes within that as well. The window parts were sketched out with the Blue Denimes to have balance of the cooler ultramarine-esque tones of the painting on either side, and then I went in with the Carmine Lake to get almost a embossed sort of feeling of the mirror. I didn't want anything too fancy like filigree. I wanted to still keep it relatively harsher with the lines to go with the checkerboard and the stripes, like I said. I then further consolidated shapes with the Carmine Lake pencil so I could really see where the rest of the structure was going. So I started with the bathtub to really get that sort of at the point where I was happy, and then started to build up the layers and tones on the laundry that I wanted to be washed. Again, that's got a little bit of symbolism regarding like baggage of how I'm feeling and all my thoughts kind of piled up on one, and I feel like I can't cope with the amount that there's there. So having that sort of piece there just kind of helped me acknowledge what's going on, and having it in a different colour kind of made it feel like that's the standing out part of my brain at the minute. I used a mix of the Carmine Lake and the Blue Denimes as like a rough sort of almost marble tile-esque feeling for the floor to go with the rug in there, and then I added a scalloped edge to the rug as well, just for a bit more of an interesting point of that as well. I think the next part was definitely trying to see how defined I wanted to go with the laundry. Did I want to keep it nice and loose, as like the thoughts kind of were a bit jumbled and I didn't quite know where everything started and finished, and then there to be light and dark in the aspect of is there hope, is there not sort of thing. And I just kind of went with it to see how I felt, and when I felt better I thought, well, that's it done sort of thing, so I could have that natural process within that. I actually used the wetter Posca marker and blended that with the paint, and it gave a really nice mid-tone between the values, so it really allowed the blending to look really, really nice and soft, which I really, really liked. I think the finish of that was definitely kind of accidental, but it worked really, really well. I then continued to evaluate the differences in the tones within the painting, so I wanted to make sure there was some contrast between darker and lighter tones even further. So I added a bit more of that glacier green, where the granulation worked really, really well as a different kind of texture. So I wanted to add a bit more of that. I also added that to where the tiles were going to be as well, just because I felt like it got a bit lost with the kind of opacity of the other parts. I thought I'd add a bit more so it still stood out enough for me to see it had kind of impact within the painting. Then the rest of the acrylic paint had dried, so I continued to go back in with that Posca marker to continue again to add the value that I wanted to and get the desired effect. I wanted there to be an element of loose sort of blending within that, but then I still wanted it to have enough rigidity to see what it was. And I think having the highlights and the different tones, just once I got the desired effect, I was happy. I didn't want to kind of mess around with it too much further. I wanted the process of viewing that part of the painting to be quite simple. You notice what it is, as though it's laundry. You see like the soft blends and the tones and like the positioning of the cloth being overlapped, but then that was about it. Having that as the focal point wasn't the desired effect, but I still wanted it to have enough substance within the painting for it to stand its own as well. So with that, I wanted there to be an element of cohesion with that. I felt it did stand out a little bit too much, so I added the scalloped edging of the rug to be also in that same raspberry shade, and then wanted the plant pot to also have a bit more purpose in its positioning, so I added a bit more of that sepia colour just to make things a bit bolder and to stand out a bit further as well. Once I was happy with the composition and like the flow of how one would actually view the painting and where things would stand, I then started working on the final touches, making certain elements stand out, adding a bit of detail to other parts just to make sure that the overall flow of viewing was the process that I wanted it to be. I wanted the focal point to be obviously the foliage, and then as the viewer sees the rest of the painting, the eye wanders and sees further and further detail, like then the striped wallpaper and the different tones within the foliage and the different types of sort of brush strokes from the foliage. I want it to be an entire process of viewing, so those that kind of do observe paintings a bit further in detail can appreciate that, but then people who see the paintings and like make their decision up a lot quicker would also still benefit and enjoy seeing that as well. There was definitely some added sparkles because that just genuinely fills me with joy. And I think I was really happy with the challenge of this. I didn't kind of add extra art supplies that I needed to. I really enjoyed having the limitations of no black and white, keeping the colours and the mediums to be quite varied in that respect. There was some dry medium that, I'm very comfortable in wet medium like paint and acrylic and stuff, but then I tend to really enjoy the mixed media aspect, that I really got to see how far I can go with that. I always find it very easy to add lots of different art supplies, that then I think the aspect of limitation can really see your skills develop. You're kind of working with what you have in like a very strict sort of way, and you can really work with those different medias. I never would have kind of mixed a Posca marker with a gouache, because I would have just chosen a colour that was pre-mixed in that respect. So to be able to do that and see the overall desired effect to work with that, and really kind of test how you can use your art supplies in such more varied ways. I find that really interesting, a definite learning process, and I just found the whole process of making this painting so cathartic. I was having a really bad time with some pretty nasty symptoms and a lot of kind of adaptation to be made with day-to-day life, and to kind of immerse myself in this project overnight while I had quite a lot of stomach ache was just much needed in many aspects. And I think that's the one part I love about art, is that yes, it's something I really enjoy in one respect, but it also really helps me in more ways than just fun and enjoyment. It actually helps me kind of process my thoughts. I find to see my feelings visually a lot more kind of easy to understand, and then to be able to tell people how I feel, it allows me an element of communication that I think I find a lot harder verbally, audibly. Visually is a lot easier for me, and I think art has such immense power that I never kind of fail to appreciate just how incredible it can make someone's life, and it has completely changed my life. Art was always a hobby, but now for it to be more than that, it's a pain relief, it's a distraction from the pain because of that. It's also a way that I can fund my life as and when I can. Obviously, cost of living is making that extremely difficult for small businesses at the minute, but as and when that picks up, being able to use that and provide other people with joy, you know, having a parcel with some pretty jewellery or some prints can fill them with joy as well. And I think it has such power that I think I never fail to underestimate just how much power art does have on my life, but also other people's life as well. But that, my loves, is the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video or like me, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here and join me in all of my arty endeavours. This video has been slightly delayed because of the symptoms I have been dealing with. I have just finally recovered from a kidney infection. Well, I've got 3 more tablets to take to hopefully nip the rest of that in the bud, but I'm still adjusting to a lot of processes. So thank you for your patience and bearing with me when there are some more delays with videos. But it was really nice to be able to do this and to have this as like part of taking a slightly dismal, difficult experience into something tangible and pretty. I will be turning this, among other original paintings, into prints as well. I really want to get some more traditional art aspects within my Etsy shop, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. All of my links are below from Etsy shop, Instagram, etc. And I just thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you have a truly magical rest of your day. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.